Welcome to the Uncensored Self podcast. I am your host, Ryann Gillen, and this is a space where women who value achievement, success, accomplishment, and wealth, but also crave happiness, love, joy, and deep fulfillment come to remember that we get to have both. Not by doing more, but by being more of who we truly are. In this show, we explore identity, energy, alignment, and embodiment because you didn't come here to follow someone else's rules. You came to right your own. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Uncensored Self podcast. I am your host, Ryann Gillen, and today we are going to have a conversation about how I learned to think the way that I think. And this has been a theme. I've gotten several comments on social media. I've had clients mention this. And just last week in the Free and Rich program, my client was like, I've never thought of it that way, Ryann. Where did you learn to think like this? And so I thought it would be really fun. I answered her question, but I thought it'd be fun to record a podcast about this because I want to be very clear that the way that I think today is not how I have always thought. I thought very stereotypically for a woman raised in a middle-class family in the Midwest, right? I was raised through the concept of hard work. I was raised through the concept of, effort, get a degree, climb the ladder, get noticed, right? Like I wasn't raised around entrepreneurs. I wasn't raised around money. And I certainly was not raised around people studying universal law. So I learned the belief system that I currently have. I'm going to change my words. I chose the belief system that I currently have. And I believe we are all capable of doing this. So I'm going to explain kind of the origin story of what really led me to thinking the way that I think and really questioning everything. And of course, giving you some tools and resources along the way. Because like I said, most of us are taught how to think. We're taught how to think, not in any malicious way. It's just the way the world works. And the way that I often describe this is think about babies. When we come into the world, we don't come in with beliefs about money, about work, about people, about jobs, about cars and houses. Like those are all things that we learn through observation, through where we are raised, through how we are raised, right? And what I thought were universal facts at one point in my life, I learned they were not facts. They are just beliefs. So there are very few, and I've said this before on the pod, but I'm going to say this again for today's conversation. There are very few facts, like true truths in the world. Most of us, we are all creating our own truth because a belief is just a thought that you've thought so many times that it feels true. So if you have a belief that hard work is what is required to be successful, and you've been taught your whole world, your whole life, that if you just work hard, you will get there, that you now believe that that is true, but that is not true for everyone. There are plenty of people who are wildly successful, who have thriving careers, who run thriving businesses, who have fuck tons of money, who don't work hard. So that is how we know the difference between what is true and what is a belief. Is there somebody else in the world doing this differently? Because if there is somebody else in the world doing this differently, that means that this must just be a belief that I hold. But let's talk about where this started for me. I will get into all of that for you. I was like, I can do the whole teaching right from here. But I want to start with, if I had to point to a time, I will tell you that I feel like I have been seeking my whole life. Like when I was in college, I would pop into churches. I was raised Catholic. We stopped going in middle school, right? Like it wasn't in any regard, but I was always looking for a connection in some way, shape, or form. Like I was looking, I've always believed that there's something bigger than me. The only place I knew how to find it was a church. And nothing really resonated with me when I was young. Somebody had me read the book U Squared, which is all about quantum leaps, when I was, 21 years old. And I remember thinking it was so weird at the time. I read The Secret in 2008 when it came out. When my ex-husband and I bought a house and moved, we did find a church and we got involved in a church, and I, taught Sunday school or children's church and all that things for several years. So I've always been, I think, looking for this information, like in my entire adult life, thinking there has got to be more to life than this. I didn't realize that's what I was consciously doing. It wasn't a conscious choice. But if I can look back, they always say hindsight's 20/20. I can see where all the dots were connected, where I was looking for this information. And when I say this information, I mean universal law. I mean our ability to create our reality, right? I've told you guys I've been questioning life my whole life, and I've gotten in a lot of fucking trouble for it, to be honest. But if I had to consciously point to a time when I realized that, and I realized my beliefs changed, was when I had Davis. So Davis was born in February of 2017. He's 9 at the time of this recording. And I remember being pregnant, and I was traveling at the time. I had a full-time corporate job, and I remember traveling and stopping at a gas station. And I'm probably 6 months pregnant. I'm visibly pregnant, right? And I'm stopped at a gas station. I'm driving back from Columbia, Missouri, which is like an hour and a half. I've been there for a couple of days for work. I'm driving home. I stop at the gas station because, of course, I have to pee because I'm pregnant, and I always have to pee anyway. A random fun fact about me. But anyway, I stop, and there's this group of boys who my guesstimation tells me they're 14 or 15 years old. And, I'm just kind of watching them interact as I'm putting gas in my car. And then I walk into the gas station, and one of the kids stops, and he holds the door open for me. He goes, "After you, ma'am." And I just had this thought. I remember it so clearly that it was like, I'm going to have one of those one day. I'm going to have one of those. I'm going to have a teenage boy in my house. And I was raised with a sister. So it's just my sister and I, my mother and my father, God bless him. He worked a lot. So I was raised around girls. I was an athlete. I played ball with girls. I have been a girl's girl my whole life. And I actually realized at that time that I did not have a really favorable view of men. I was raised to believe that you don't need a man, right? We don't need any men. We can do this by ourselves, right? I was very much taught, do not depend on a man. Take care of yourself, make your own money. And so at this time that this is happening, I had Davis when I was in my early 30s, and I just realized, and I'm married at this time to a good guy. My ex-husband is still a really good guy. So it wasn't this thought that I didn't think there were any good men in the world. I just didn't really value them in any way. I didn't really see the point. And I've said this to the man who lives in my house, so I don't mean to offend anyone, but it might. But it was just I don't really see the point. But I was like, fuck. If I'm going to raise a man, I have to view them differently. And it was the first time that I had the conscious thought that I need to view the world differently. If I'm going to raise this kid to be a functioning member of society, I have to view men differently, right? And this man-hating energy of most men are useless and, whatever, needed to go so that I didn't teach him that, right? I didn't want him thinking that. I couldn't imagine raising a kid thinking that he was, not valuable in any way. So my belief about men had to change. And so why I'm sharing this with you is because it was the first time that I realized a belief exists and I could actively choose to change it. That I didn't have to believe that all men were useless and most men were assholes and I'd be better off doing it by myself. I did not have to have that thought. I could change it. And it was the first time that I consciously chose to start thinking about that. Did I know it was going to lead me here? No, not even a little bit. But that was the first time that I realized that I had a belief that wasn't going to serve me. And if I was going to be who my son needed me to be to raise him, that I needed to start changing that belief. Okay. I often tell the story of, and it was not too long after having Davis. And I don't think that that is a coincidence that since having Davis, this whole process has sped up, right? The whole process of a belief. I told you I spent years seeking. I spent 10 years seeking. And then it's been 9 years and my life has changed more, in that 9 years than it did in the previous 10, right? Because everything started to speed up when I realized I can change my beliefs, that these things are not all true. And so then I realized sitting in my corner office, I tell the story often, right? I had a high earning commission sales rep. I didn't think that entrepreneurship was necessary, right? I was I make a fuck ton of money at the time. I thought it was a fuck ton of money. I make a lot of money. I don't have to take the risk. I don't need the responsibility. I like being a salesperson. I don't need to go be an entrepreneur. I had no call to be an entrepreneur. But then I had a thought not long after having Davis sitting in that corner office. And I thought, gosh, this can't be all I was created to do. And even at that time, I wasn't looking for entrepreneurship. I thought it was just an industry change, but I discovered entrepreneurship. And then I had to develop, again, a whole different set of beliefs about money and about creating money and about being paid and all of those different things. So again, changing my beliefs around, oh, well, I don't want to be the person taking the risk. I'm just good to sell to I'm willing to be the person taking a risk. That was another belief that I had to overcome. So then here's another one. And I'm just telling you all these different dominoes and then we'll talk about it from there. So my third domino that I want to share with you is I had a program called the Uncensored Sales program, then the Uncensored Sales Accelerator. So it was my very first coaching program when I was teaching sales to new entrepreneurs back in 2020 and 2021. I put about 200 women through that program and over the course of, I think, just a little over 2 years. And some of my clients went on to create wildly successful businesses. Like I had several women making $400,000 or $500,000 a year, right? One woman in particular, I remember her story was that she ran 12 sales calls in a month and got 0 no's. And then once she came into my program and she learned how to run a consultation, her next 6 sales calls turned into clients. And she one who went on to build a multiple 6-figure business from our work together. Another client who, went by just barely getting by to growing a $500,000 cleaning company. So I had clients really winning, but then I also had clients who had access to the same coaching and the same information. They had access to me. They had access to the coaches that I had hired to run this thing. All of this existed, but they were not having those same results. And I was really frustrated by that because one, I don't like taking money from people who don't get results. Like that's not something that I relish. I'm not one of those people who's like, I don't care. You paid me, tough toots. Like it's very important to me that I deliver a quality product and my clients get what they came for. So I really started questioning, like, why is this happening, right? Because it's all access to the same information. There's got to be something more than just information. Because again, my belief at the time was that if you just knew enough and you worked hard enough and you just gave me the right plan and I could work the plan and the plan would work. Well, I'd given these people the plan that I had proven worked, and it wasn't working for them. So I was like, something here, something about that belief that if you just give me the plan and you work the plan will work, got cracked in that moment. That can't possibly be true because it isn't working for everyone. So it can't just be follow the plan and do the work. And I can't, like when people came to me and told me they weren't getting results, I added in accountability. Like I did everything I could to make sure that they were in fact doing the work. But there were people who were actively doing the work and not getting the same results that I was getting, not getting the same results of the 2 women's success stories that I shared with you, right? Why weren't they getting the same results? And that just kept rolling around in my brain. Why can 2 people access the same things and have different results? It's got to be that it can't be the information. It can't just be the plan. And that really sparked a very deep study for me of universal law, manifestation, quantum physics, and reality creation. So in the course of just a few years, like I think of that first thought with Davis must have been 2016, right? When I was pregnant with him. And then it was late 2017 when I had the corner office moment, because I say that I started my business in 2018. It started making business money in 2019, right? And then it was 2020 to 2021. So it was in the course of 4 years that I had these 3 different moments in my life where I realized maybe what I believe to be true isn't 100% true. And if these things aren't true, maybe there's some other shit that I have been believing and I have been buying into and I have been thinking that also isn't serving me. And that's what led me to the study. So like I said, it happened really, really quickly. So I will tell you though, in the beginning, when I started this, it was not from the heart-centered place that I'm delivering this podcast to you today. And I just want to be honest with you because I share this story often. Like when I learned about manifestation and universal law, and all I wanted to do was just manifest a fuck ton of money. I just wanted to do that. But it really was driven by this, like wanting to be right. I want to be right. I want to do good work. It was very much a self-serving thing in the beginning. And I don't know why my intuition just told me that I needed to share that with you because again, it started egoically. And so if you feel like you're somewhat on an ego journey, that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why. Like I said, that was just kind of an intuitive thought. But here's what I've learned. And here's why I think so differently. Because when they, whoever the fuck they is, you are the creator of your reality, it's not a bumper sticker. It's literal. Your reality is a direct reflection of your identity, your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. That is what I learned in these situations, right? Where it was like, okay, if not all men are assholes, because I'm going to raise my kid theoretically not to be one, right? I have to see it differently, right? I have to come from a different identity. I have to come from a different set of beliefs. I have to think different thoughts, feel different feelings, and take action from a different place. The same thing when I went from corporate to entrepreneurship. I had to become somebody entirely different to be able to take on the risk of being an entrepreneur. And then finally going into, this concept of why do some people get results with the same information? That's why 2 people, like I said, 2 people can go through the same program with the same information, and have completely different outcomes or experiences based on their lens. So that is what those 3 things taught me, is that it is quite literal when I say it. And so what also, like I said, it started egoically. Maybe this is why my intuition was telling me this because it's in my notes too. is really going from what I wanted was external success, right? When I found this information, I wanted I was still chasing the external, right? I was trying to use spiritual internal tools to chase a number externally to still be accepted, right? I wanted the money and the dream job and the pretty outside world. But internally, even when I first found this work, I was unhappy, jealous, snarky, and a mean person somewhat internally. Maybe not mean, but I was just a bitch, and there are plenty of people will tell you that. Like, if you got in my way, I was going to fucking roll right over your ass. Like, there was a mean streak in there that was very egoic. But what happened, is when I had my first $1 million year and I realized that I had everything that I wanted. I was in the dream house. I had just bought the car. I told you guys about, I told you guys about the car and the house in the last episode, right? I had the house. I had the car. I was making the money. I had the private chef. My ex-husband was staying at home with the kids. Like, I had it all. And I was I was very unhappy. So then that sparked the question of, what is happiness? If happiness is not what I had been promised it was, which, like, go to college, get a job, climb the ladder, work hard, do good work, care about what you do in the world, and then you will be ... right? None of that. I did all of that. But internally, I'm not a happy person. So then the question was, what is happiness? Right? And so that's when I really shifted from wanting to be rich, from wanting to be successful, to wanting a really rich life, right? That's where free and rich comes from. I thought that I wanted to be a person with money. That's ultimately what the goal was when I discovered this work, was I just wanted to be a person with money. I didn't realize that, but when we chase money, when we chase external things, I just want to be a person with that thing. And that did not take into account my happiness, my fulfillment, my joy, my soul. And so, like I said, that's when I realized that, like, we can create things all that we want, but the things aren't going to bring us the internal feeling, right? The feeling that we're looking for. So then I really started focusing on, I don't just want money. I want to be rich. And rich does come in the form of material things, but there's a lot of other things that go along with it. So I then made the decision that I don't just want, in fact, I can say this pretty confidently, I don't want to be successful based on today's definition of success. I am not willing, or do I desire, to be the type of woman who makes a shit ton of money and internally is not happy, is not healthy, is not taking care of herself, is not doing work that she enjoys, and is angry all of the time. And I'm just not willing to be that woman anymore. That's really what this was. So that is how all the dominoes, all of the different ways that led me to thinking differently. I want something different. And if it is literal that I'm the creator of my reality, I have to learn to think differently. So here's a couple of things that I did that I think are really, really important. So the first one was, I stopped seeing obstacles as obstacles. That was one of the first things I did. When something isn't going the way that I wanted it to, I used to view it as, this is a problem I need to solve. I have a problem. I have a business problem. I have a relationship problem. I have a health problem. I need to figure out how to fix this. That is the old way that I thought about it, right? And then the question I started asking myself that really started to change things for me is, the version of me that I desire to be, that is my free and rich life, living my free and rich life, she is the uncensored self. How does she view this? It's no longer an obstacle. This isn't a problem because she's already solved it. So it's a perspective. So now when things show up in my world that I don't like, I don't see them as problems I have to solve. I see it as, there is a perspective here that I need to shift. How can I view this differently, right? What belief am I believing that views this as a problem, right? And that's really where the thinking started being different. Like, what if this isn't a problem? If I'd already solved this, how have other people solved this? And just really started asking myself different questions. So the first shift I made to think differently, just to clarify for you, because I know I gave you a lot of words there. It's interesting the way that this is coming through in my brain. It's really interesting the way my brain is feeding me this. But instead of seeing obstacles, I don't see obstacles. I see perspective shifts. When things aren't going the way they wanted to, my question is no longer, how do I fix this? It's what perspective needs to change so that this has a resolution, a harmonious resolution, a resolution aligned with my free and rich life. And thinking from that perspective has just caused me to ask myself better questions, right? Because I'm not like, oh my God, I have a problem. I got to fix the problem. Got to fix the problem. It's like, this is not going the way that I want it to. I wonder what perspective I need to take to move through this. I wonder what question I can ask. I wonder what thought I could think. And then I will tap into, and I know this sounds woo, but I will tap into the version of me who I know is running a $10 million company. And I will say, okay, when I'm running a $10 million company and this is in front of me, what do I do? What do I think? And most of the time, the answer is, this would not be a problem if I were running a $10 million company. This would just be, it would either dissolve, it would be an illusion, It would be not my problem to handle. And then I think from that space. That's what we talk from thinking from. I teach this in my identity practice, which if you have not downloaded it, you should. It's completely free. But that's really the work here. When I think from the version of me running a $10 million business, doing only things that I love, and I look at this obstacle in front of me, I change my perspective. I change my identity. I change what I'm thinking from. And then I ask myself, how would I handle this particular circumstance? And then I take action from there. That's what it means to shift your identity, thoughts, feelings, actions, create. So that's one thing, right? Obstacles to perspectives. The second thing is making time for thinking on purpose. This is one that is a non-negotiable, and this is one that I think a lot of people resist because it's the uncomfortable one. Sitting with yourself and by yourself and sorting through the bullshit stories in your brain and the things about yourself you're not proud of and the beliefs that you know aren't serving you and the opinions that you can keep holding on to for dear life. It doesn't always feel good. And I always tell you guys that I tell you the truth as often as I can, right? But one of the things that I knew needed to happen, if my thoughts create my reality, I needed to start thinking on purpose. I could no longer just let my brain hijack me and take me for a fucking ride. And the only way I knew how to do that was to start thinking on purpose. So again, like I said, I've created these rituals in my life, my identity practice being one of them. That's a big part, right? But what I had to do was I had to move from being like this packed, busy, and constantly reacting and doing, right? Like when I thought I needed to make time to think, my first thought was, I don't have time for that. Your brain might now be telling you, I don't have time for that. But you don't not have time for this, right? This is something that you have to make time for. And the way that I taught myself this, if you want to be clear, is it was like, I would never blow off a meeting with a client. I would never blow off a sales conversation. You would never blow off a call with your boss. But why are you willing to blow off this really powerful meeting to yourself? So that's just, again, the way that I think about things. If this were really important to me, I would make time for it, right? So I believe in my heart of hearts that spending a lot of time alone with yourself is mandatory to change your life, cutting out the outside noises. And I don't mean like go away for 21 days. I mean like give yourself 20 to 30 minutes every single day where the only voice in your head is your own, and you can actually sort through all of those thoughts. This was so big in me learning to think differently, was actually hearing what I was thinking and catching some of the thoughts and was like, ooh, I don't like that at all. I don't want to be a person who thinks that way. I shared this with you guys on the podcast. I had a lot of thoughts and beliefs about people that I didn't like. Again, I didn't like having the belief that men were useless. Like that didn't feel like a good thing. Like, but if I didn't slow down and listen to myself, I wouldn't have been able to catch that, right? So making deliberate space for thinking is really, really important. So for me, this is what this looks like for me every single morning. I get up early. I like to get up early. I don't think it's required to get up early to do this. You do not have to be an early bird to do this. For me, I am an early bird. I enjoy it. It's a choice that I make, but I get up every single morning and I make a cup of coffee and I sit and I light a candle and I light some incense and I breathe and I ask God for ideas and I journal and I brainstorm and I just spend time by myself, just tuning into what do I want and asking myself really high level questions and then dealing with all the garbage that comes up. Another one that I do, going for walks without headphones. Going for walks without headphones, it's probably the number one thing that I recommend to all my clients is in my walk is actually when I do my identity practice, but going for walk without headphones to actually think on purpose was huge for me. Getting rid of the constant onslaught of listening to other people's thoughts and opinions. And I love learning and I love studying, but like I was consuming so much of other people's thoughts that I couldn't hear my own. So going for walks without the headphones, learning to think on purpose by myself. What do I want to think about? Choosing my focus, choosing my thoughts, learning to redirect my brain, asking myself higher level questions every single day was how I did this, right? And then another one, regulating our nervous system. Every single day, I recommend to all of my clients that they breathe intentionally for a minimum of 5 minutes a day. Minimum of 5 minutes a day, breathing on purpose. That is my recommended. There's a million ways to regulate your nervous system. Walking outside, moving your body, but really just intentional breath work, bringing the attention back to yourself over and over and over again and not letting your crazy mind drive is really, really powerful. So regulating the nervous system is important because what we want to be able to do, and the reason why I think that regulating the nervous system is so important to thinking differently is because when we are dysregulated, whether you are in fight or flight or fawn, whatever state you are in, your body has hijacked your emotions, essentially, right? Your body, your hormones are flooding. I'm not a scientist, guys, right? But your hormones are flooding. Your body is physically reacting to what it perceives as a threat. A dysregulated nervous system is a nervous system that is perceiving a threat. It doesn't know the difference between this difficult conversation you have to have with a client and being chased by a tiger. And when you are hijacked, when you are dysregulated, it's harder to redirect your thoughts. Right? It's your brain just really is trying to keep you in survival mode. It gets louder. Your body gets tense. There's a whole lot going on and is way more challenging to redirect your thoughts from that state. So for me, making time every single day to actually make sure that I can feel all of my feelings and feel into my body is really, really important so that when I do get hijacked, when I am dysregulated, I have the skills to find it and redirect. Okay. But here's something else I want you to know. I don't know why. Again, this is intuitive and notes mixed together today. And I feel like I'm a little all over the map because it's not a traditional teaching, but I feel like this is important to share with you guys. Choosing to think differently has changed my life in the most incredible ways. However, it does change things when you don't see the world through the same lens as the people around you, whether it be family, whether it be friends, whether it be colleagues. It does introduce challenges, right? I am a weirdo. I know that. The way that I'm raising my children is wildly different. The way that I approach work, the way that I spend my time, I am different than almost every single person that I know. And I'm not as generous with my energy as I once was, right? I used to be willing to give anybody my time, right? Because isn't that how we build relationships and grow a business? And I don't do that anymore. I don't fit in typical social settings because I don't agree with sitting around and bullshitting and gossiping. So I don't get invited to things like that. I don't go to things like that. I don't go to happy hour because sitting around and poisoning yourself and talking shit about people doesn't sound like fun to me anymore. So I always feel like I gotta tell you the good but the bad. Has my life changed for the better? Would I do it over and over and over again? Yes, 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 and yes. However, there have been trade-offs of it because I am in the minority in the way that I think, in the way that I move, in the way that I believe. And it requires an immense amount of, I'm going to say, mental toughness, the ability to know that, hey, these people think differently than me. And that doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make me wrong, all of that, right? Because here's the deal. The world that we live in has made it popular to be overworked, overweight, stressed, unhappy in our relationships, and miserable. And I refuse to participate in that. And that is a wildly different way of viewing the world than most people. And it does alienate me in some spaces because some people want me to make it okay. It's okay that I'm literally physically ill and having to have surgeries and treatments. I'm just going to keep working this hard. And they want me to get in the pool with them and understand it. And I don't. People are like, let me tell you why my stress is justified. Like, Ryann, my stress, I can't help but be stressed. I don't agree with that. I believe we all have a choice to be stressed. And again, sometimes that makes me unpopular. It really does. But I also know what the trade-off is. I know what it feels like to live in alignment. I know what it feels like to wake up every morning and feel good, right? To wake up and do work that I get excited about, to feel good in my body, to feel strong, to feel healthy, to feel committed, to go all in. And so sometimes I have to trade the human desire to be liked and to fit in to take the best care of myself. So I hope I answered the question. How did you learn to think differently? What are the series of events? Maybe you're realizing that you've had some of these series of events, right? Great places for you to start if this conversation intrigues you. First of all, the identity practice is free. It really is, in a nutshell, the baseline of the work. Again, all of my clients at all different rates, I always recommend their identity practice. It becomes a non-negotiable. So please go download that. The identity audit is a private one-on-one. It's a 7-day space that I think is also an excellent place. If you're like, okay, I'm ready to start thinking differently. I'm ready to start shedding some of these identities. I'm ready to start getting rid of some of this shit that is not mine. This is a great place to bring this space. We're going to dive deep in 7 days. We're going to get a really big transformation, a whole lot of clarity so that you can build the life that you want to build, because that is my heart of hearts. Is I want all of you to wake up every single morning excited about your day. I want you to have all of the resources that you want. I want you to be surrounded by people you love. I want you to feel good in your body. I want you to have relationships that fill you up. I want you to be happy and healthy. I want you to have your free and rich life. I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Uncensored Self podcast. If this conversation cracked something open for you, trust that that's the work. And share this episode with a woman in your life who's ready to stop performing and start creating. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave a review. It helps this message reach the women who need it most. Remember, you're the creator. The rules are yours. And your uncensored self, she already knows what to do. Keep leading, keep listening, keep becoming.